Have you ever had that moment when you realize the people you thought were your friends actually see you completely differently than you see yourself? That crushing instant when their true perception of you comes into focus? For me, it was a random Tuesday morning at Harbor Coffee when I overheard 4 women I'd considered my closest friends for over a decade discussing their upcoming girls' trip to Napa Valley. The same annual trip we'd been taking together for years, except this time, they weren't including me. "Thank God," I heard Amanda say from behind the decorative plant divider that separated our tables. "I love Becca, but this trip needs to be, energizing. Younger. She's almost 50. She'd bring down the vibe." Almost 50. Too old. Past my prime. Apparently at 48, I had crossed some invisible threshold that made me unworthy of their company. I sat frozen, my latte cooling between my palms as they continued planning what had once been our shared tradition. I didn't confront them. I didn't make a scene. I simply paid my bill, walked out, and began plotting something much more satisfying than a wine-tasting weekend. 3 weeks later, as they posted their first photos from Napa, I was boarding a luxury Caribbean cruise ship. On my arm, the designer luggage my ex-husband Eric had always called unnecessarily extravagant. And by my side, the last people they would ever expect, their ex-husbands. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Friendship after 40 is supposed to be simpler. The drama of youth behind you, the competition over men long settled, the petty jealousies resolved through maturity and perspective. At least that's what I thought until that morning at Harbor Coffee, when I learned how disposable I was to the women who had been my core support system for 12 years. I'd known Megan the longest. We met at a neighborhood book club shortly after I moved to Lakeview Heights with my then-husband Eric. Megan was warm, vivacious, and impossible not to like. She introduced me to Natalie, a pediatrician whose dry humor masked a heart of gold. Olivia joined our circle next, bringing her endless energy and fitness enthusiasm that both exhausted and inspired us. Amanda completed our quintet a year later, her real estate savvy helping several of us find our perfect homes in the prestigious suburb. We were the perfect blend of personalities and professions, the kind of friend group that gets featured in lifestyle magazines, successful women balancing careers and families while maintaining those all-important female friendships that studies show help women live longer, healthier lives. We celebrated each other's promotions, consoled each other through parenting disasters, and held each other up through marital difficulties. When Eric and I started having problems in our 15th year of marriage, they were my lifeline. Megan brought over wine and let me vent until 2 a.m. Natalie offered practical advice about divorce lawyers and financial planning. Olivia insisted on taking me to her fitness studio, claiming endorphins were better than therapy. And Amanda, always the pragmatist, helped me assess the value of our home for the inevitable asset division. I did the same for them when their marriages hit rocky patches. When Thomas left Olivia for his teaching assistant, I spent weeks helping her redecorate their shared home, erasing his presence room by room until the space felt entirely hers again. When James and Natalie separated after his emotional affair with a colleague, I was the one who sat with her through those first raw nights of anger and grief. When Amanda discovered Robert's online relationships with multiple women, I organized our first girls' weekend getaway to help her clear her head and plan her next steps. That first impromptu trip to a mountain cabin evolved into our annual tradition, a sacred weekend where we escaped responsibilities, reconnected with each other, and reminded ourselves that no matter what life threw our way, we had our friendship to rely on. For 10 years, we never missed it. 10 destinations, 10 opportunities to reaffirm our bond. From mountain hideaways to beachfront cottages, from desert spas to city adventures, we'd explored them together, collecting memories and inside jokes that I thought would sustain us into our golden years. The planning always began months in advance. We'd create elaborate Pinterest boards, research restaurants and attractions, budget meticulously to ensure everyone could participate regardless of their financial situation. Some years, when Olivia's fitness studio was struggling, or when Natalie took unpaid leave during her father's illness, the rest of us quietly covered more of the costs. That's what friends do. They hold each other up when someone stumbles. This year should have been my turn to receive that consideration. The divorce from Eric had been finalized just 3 months earlier, leaving me financially secure but emotionally drained. My interior design business was doing well, but the legal fees had taken a chunk out of my savings. Still, I'd been putting aside money each month for our Napa trip, looking forward to it as the bright spot on my horizon. We'd talked about wine country for years, always pushing it off because of the expense. But this year, during a dinner at the Pines Country Club, Megan had raised her glass and announced, "Ladies, I think it's time for Napa." We'd all enthusiastically agreed, spending the rest of the evening discussing wineries and tasting menus. At least that's what I remembered. Apparently, the plans had shifted without my knowledge. Napa remained the destination, but I had been removed from the passenger list. After leaving Harbor Coffee that morning, I drove straight to Greenwood Park. I needed space to think, to process what I'd heard. The walking path circled a small lake, offering both scenic views and sufficient distance to ensure private conversations remained private. I'd walked this path dozens of times before, when contemplating leaving Eric, when worrying about Sophia's college applications, when considering expanding my design business. Today, I walked it trying to understand how a friendship of 12 years could suddenly exclude me based on a number. 48, 2 years shy of 50. Apparently, that was the dividing line between inclusion and obsolescence. The worst part wasn't even the exclusion itself. It was the casual cruelty with which it had been decided. She'd bring down the vibe. She'd be in bed by 9. Credior. They always seen me this way? As the matronly boring one? The token older friend they tolerated rather than cherished? I found a bench overlooking the water and sat, watching ducks glide across the surface, creating gentle ripples that expanded outward. 3 hours earlier, I'd been excited about my day. A new client consultation, lunch with a supplier, and dinner plans with my daughter Sophia, who was home from college for the weekend. Now all I could think about was that conversation, replaying it in my mind, each repetition revealing new layers of hurt. My phone buzzed with a text from Megan in our group chat. "Ladies, finalizing Napa details this week. So excited for our rejuvenating escape." No mention of me, of course. No acknowledgement that this had been our shared tradition. Just the assumption that I wouldn't notice my exclusion or would quietly accept it. I scrolled through our recent messages, noting how the conversation patterns had shifted. Fewer direct questions to me. Plans increasingly made during hours when I'd typically be working with clients. References to gatherings I hadn't been invited to. The evidence had been there all along, but I'd attributed it to everyone's busy schedules, to the natural ebb and flow of group dynamics. How naive. The afternoon sun was warm on my face as another realization dawned on me. This wasn't just about age. This was about status too. I was newly divorced while Megan was still married. I was starting over while they were either established in new relationships or enjoying the freedom of being single and dating. I was a reminder of what could go wrong in life while they wanted to focus on new possibilities. My phone buzzed. Again. This time it was Sophia confirming our dinner plans. My beautiful, brilliant daughter who at 21 saw the world with clarity I sometimes envied. She'd always been wise beyond her years, inheriting my creativity but tempering it with her father's analytical mind. Talking to her always helped me gain perspective. That evening over pasta at the Azure restaurant, I told her what had happened. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Her face darkened with each detail, her fork pausing midway to her mouth when I repeated Amanda's comment about me being almost 50. "That's ridiculous," she said when I finished. "You're younger than half my professors in spirit and style. And since when is age a friendship criterion? That's so... high school." I smiled weakly. Maybe friendship has an expiration date I wasn't aware of. "Mom." Sophia put down her fork and reached for my hand. "If that's how they're acting, they're doing you a favor by showing their true colors. Real friends don't treat each other that way." "When did you get so wise?" I asked, squeezing her fingers. "Probably learned it from my too old mom," she replied with an eye roll, and for the first time that day, I laughed genuinely. After dinner, as we shared a tiramisu, Sophia asked, "So what are you going to do about it? Confront them?" I considered the question. The old Becca would have swallowed the hurt, made excuses for their behavior, perhaps even blamed herself for not being fun enough. The pre-divorce Becca would have sent a passive-aggressive text, hoping they'd recognize their mistake and include me. But I wasn't that person anymore. 3 years of marriage counseling that failed to save my relationship had nonetheless taught me valuable lessons about standing up for myself. The divorce process, painful as it was, had forced me to advocate for my interests instead of accommodating everyone else's. I had emerged stronger, more decisive, and significantly less willing to accept treatment that diminished me. "No," I said finally. Confronting them would only lead to awkward apologies and pity invitations. "I'm thinking of something different." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" I thought about the upcoming weekend, about the 5 days of vacation time I'd already requested from my business, about the new summer clothes I'd purchased, in anticipation of California sunshine. "I'm still going to take that time off," I said slowly, an idea forming. "Just not for Napa." "Solo trip?" Sophia suggested. "That could be empowering." "Not solo," I replied, a smile tugging at my lips as an outrageous thought took hold. "Actually, I might have the perfect travel companions in mind." Sophia tilted her head, curious. "Who?" "Let's just say it would make quite the statement." I reached for the check, suddenly energized. "I need to make some calls." The seed of an idea had taken root. Was it petty? Perhaps. Vindictive? Possibly. But something about it felt deliciously appropriate, a response that would make a point without creating a direct confrontation. A way to reclaim my dignity while also enjoying myself thoroughly. The next morning, after a night of planning and research, I made my first call. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I needed. It had been a while since we'd spoken directly, but we'd always maintained an amicable relationship, especially since our social circles overlapped. "James? It's Becca Mitchell," I said when he answered. "I have an unusual proposition for you. Are you free for coffee today?" James Chen had been Natalie's husband for 15 years before their divorce 2 years ago. A financial advisor with his own practice, he had always been the quietest of our husbands, observant and thoughtful. We had bonded years ago over a shared love of historical fiction and often exchanged book recommendations even after he and Natalie split. We met at a cafe downtown, away from our usual haunts in Lakeview Heights, where we might run into familiar faces. His expression when I explained my idea was priceless, confusion giving way to disbelief, followed by unexpected amusement. "Let me make sure I understand," he said, leaning forward over his black coffee. "You want me to go on a luxury cruise? With you the same weekend Natalie and her friends are in Napa? Because they excluded you for being too old?" "And with the other ex-husbands, yes," I confirmed, maintaining eye contact despite the audacity of my request. "Thomas, Robert, and Eric, if they'll agree." James sat back, a slow smile spreading across his face. You know, Natalie's been especially smug lately. Something about reclaiming her youth and living her best chapter. This would certainly provide an interesting plot twist to her narrative. So you're considering it? I hadn't expected such quick interest. He laughed, a genuine sound I realized I'd rarely heard during his marriage to Natalie. I'm more than considering it. I'm in. When do we leave? 1 down, 3 to go. Thomas Burke was next on my list. As Olivia's ex-husband, he had perhaps the most reason to harbor resentment. Their divorce a year ago had been messy, with Olivia broadcasting his affair with a teaching assistant to everyone in our social circle. The architecture professor had become something of a pariah at the Pines Country Club, where Olivia's side of the story was accepted as gospel. We met for lunch at a bistro near the university where he taught. He arrived looking guarded, his academic's posture slightly stooped as if expecting another blow. "I was surprised to get your call," he admitted after we ordered. "I thought everyone in your circle had written me off." "I try not to judge situations I wasn't part of," I replied carefully. "And marriages are complicated. I know that better than most now." His relief was visible. "Thank you for that. Now, what's this mysterious proposition you mentioned?" When I outlined my plan, his response was even more enthusiastic than James's had been. "A chance to reclaim some dignity and have a Caribbean vacation. Sign me up." Olivia's been posting daily about how her new chapter includes only positive, youthful energy in her life. The look on her face when she sees those photos. He trailed off, shaking his head with a mixture of regret and satisfaction. Robert Wilson required more convincing. Still technically separated rather than divorced from Amanda, he was hesitant about any action that might affect their ongoing negotiations. We met at a golf course cafe where he nervously adjusted his hat throughout our conversation. "I don't know, Becca," he said after I explained. "Things are delicate right now with the settlement." "I understand," I assured him. "This isn't about causing problems. It's about..." I searched for the right words. "Reclaiming our social narrative. They've decided we don't fit their story anymore. You because of the separation, me because of my age. I'm suggesting we write our own story instead." He considered this, rolling a golf tee between his fingers. "Amanda did just deny my request for a weekend with our son because she said they needed girls-only healing time in Napa. Time she didn't even invite you to share." I nodded, letting him process. "And you said James and Thomas are already on board?" "They are. We're just missing you and, hopefully, Eric." Robert broke into a reluctant smile. "What the hell? Count me in. If nothing else, it'll be nice to take a vacation where I'm not made to feel like I'm ruining someone's good time just by existing." The final call was the most difficult. Eric and I had managed to establish a cordial post-divorce relationship, primarily for Sophia's sake, but there was still an undercurrent of tension between us. 3 years of failed marriage counseling had exposed wounds that were slow to heal. I suggested meeting at a neutral location, a coffee shop in the business district where he worked as a corporate lawyer. He arrived precisely on time, as always. His suit impeccable, his expression carefully neutral. "This is unexpected," he said after ordering his usual Americano. "Is everything okay with Sophia?" "She's fine. Thriving, actually. This is about something else entirely." I took a deep breath and outlined my plan, watching his expression shift from confusion to surprise to something approaching admiration. "That's not what I expected from you," he said when I finished. "The Becca I was married to would have internalized the hurt and made excuses for everyone." I met his gaze steadily. "I'm not that Becca anymore." A moment of recognition passed between us, an acknowledgement that the changes that had driven us apart had also helped me evolve into someone stronger. "So, You're asking me to join you and the other ex-husbands on a cruise specifically designed to make your former friends jealous? He summarized, a hint of amusement in his voice. When you put it that way, it sounds petty, I admitted. It is petty, he agreed, then surprised me by grinning. But it's also brilliant, and they deserve it. I raised an eyebrow. You think so? Becca, you were the glue in that friend group for years. You helped Olivia redesign her entire house after the divorce. You spent 3 days organizing Natalie's father's funeral when she was too distraught to function. You found Amanda's son his first internship, and now they're excluding you because you're too old? He shook his head in disgust. Count me in. With all 4 men on board, I moved to the next phase. I researched cruise options, looking for the perfect combination of luxury, photogenic locations, and availability on the exact dates of the Napa trip. The Caribbean Paradise Cruise stood out immediately. A high-end voyage with premium suites available on the Sapphire deck, exclusive, beach excursions, and a reputation for catering to affluent travelers. I booked 5 suites, upgrading to the premium drink package and private dining options. The cost was considerable, significantly more than the Napa trip would have been, but this wasn't about saving money. This was about making a statement. Next came wardrobe considerations. My closet, while elegant, catered more to client meetings than resort life. I scheduled a session with a personal shopper, investing in flowing summer dresses, sophisticated swimwear, and evening attire that highlighted the figure I worked hard to maintain despite being, as Amanda so helpfully pointed out, almost 50. Meanwhile, I maintained perfect normalcy in our group chat. When Megan shared a link to a wine tour with the message, "Can't wait for this, ladies," I responded with generic enthusiasm. "That looks amazing. You all will have so much fun." The "you all?" hung awkwardly in the chat for a moment before Amanda replied with a simple, "Thanks," and quickly changed the subject to her new haircut. No one acknowledged the elephant in the room, that these plans explicitly excluded me from a tradition I had been part of for a decade. Their silence confirmed what I already knew. They weren't planning to invite me. They were hoping I wouldn't make a scene, that I would gracefully fade into the background of their lives, accepting my new status as a former friend rather than a current one. But grace can take many forms. Sometimes it means quiet acceptance. Other times, it means orchestrating a reaction so perfect that it leaves everyone questioning their assumptions. I was aiming for the latter. 2 weeks before departure, I created a new Instagram account. I named it Second Chance Voyage and kept it private, accepting only mutual friends who knew both me and my former friends. People who would understand exactly what they were seeing when the photos started appearing. I didn't post anything immediately. Timing would be crucial for maximum impact. Instead, I focused on coordinating with my unlikely travel companions. We established a group chat of our own, where James volunteered to handle dinner reservations for the cruise. Thomas researched the best excursions at each port. Robert, ever the tech enthusiast, arranged for a professional photographer to meet us at one of the beaches, and Eric, surprisingly, took care of arranging transportation to and from the port. There was an unexpected camaraderie in our planning, a shared understanding that transcended our complicated histories. We had all, in different ways, been deemed insufficient by the women who now called themselves the Forever Young Ladies, in their social media posts about Napa. 3 days before our departure, I made my first post on the new Instagram account. A photo of my packed suitcase, the edge of my passport visible, alongside a corner of the cruise brochure. The caption was simple: New adventures with unexpected companions. Sometimes the best journeys begin when other doors close. A second chance voyage. Countdown begins. I tagged no one, explained nothing. But within hours, mutual acquaintances were commenting with curious questions. The wife of Megan's husband's business partner asked, "Ooh, where are you headed?" A mother from Sophia's former high school wondered, "Unexpected companions?" Do tell. I answered none of them, letting curiosity build. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia, the first direct message I'd received from her in weeks. "Hey, stranger, are you going somewhere this weekend? Looks fun." I read it, smiled, and set my phone aside without responding. The stage was set. Let the performance begin. The morning of our departure dawned clear and warm, a perfect day for embarking on a Caribbean adventure. I had arranged for a car service to pick me up, insisting it was more practical than leaving my car in long-term parking at the port. As the sleek black sedan pulled into my driveway, my phone chimed with a notification. Megan had posted the first photo from Napa, the four of them raising wine glasses in a vineyard, captioned, "Let the rejuvenation begin." Napa girls, forever young. I smiled to myself as the driver loaded my luggage into the trunk. Perfect timing. When I arrived at the port, James was already waiting, looking relaxed in linen pants and a light blue shirt that complemented his salt and pepper hair. He greeted me with a warm hug that felt surprisingly natural. "Ready for our grand adventure?" he asked, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "More than ready," I replied, feeling a flutter of excitement that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with the promise of something new. Thomas arrived next, followed by Robert, both dressed casually but elegantly, a far cry from the practical golf attire and academic tweeds I was accustomed to seeing them in. Last came Eric, walking toward us with the confident stride that had first attracted me to him nearly 2 decades ago. "Well, well," he said, surveying our group with amusement. "Aren't we a sight?" And we were. 5 middle-aged people with intertwined histories, about to embark on what might be the most unusual vacation any of us had ever taken. Check-in was seamless, our premium status ensuring priority boarding. As we walked up the gangway, I couldn't resist taking a photo of the massive ship gleaming in the morning sun. I posted it to the Instagram account with the caption, "When life gives you exclusion, book a better inclusion." Second chance voyage, day 1. Almost immediately, my phone began buzzing with notifications. I silenced it and slipped it into my bag. Let them wonder. The suites on the Sapphire deck exceeded even my high expectations. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic ocean views. Plush king-sized beds promised restful nights and private. Balconies provided personal spaces for morning coffee or evening reflection. The welcoming bottle of champagne and fruit basket added a touch of indulgence that set the tone for the entire trip. After settling in, we gathered at the Starlight Lounge for our first toast. The space was elegantly appointed with dark wood, crystal chandeliers, and a wall of windows that showcased the receding shoreline as the ship began its journey. James raised his glass first. "To new beginnings," he proposed, "and to friendships. Without age limits," I added, clinking my champagne flute against his. Thomas insisted we take a group photo, positioning us with the sunset as our backdrop. We arranged ourselves casually, me in the center, surrounded by 4 handsome men, golden light bathing us in a flattering glow. The resulting image was striking, 5 adults radiating easy confidence and genuine enjoyment of each other's company. I posted it immediately with the caption, "Plot twist, second chance voyage, your ex-husband's club," and then turned off notifications. The message had been sent. Now it was time to actually enjoy this cruise we'd planned. Our first dinner together in the ship's premier restaurant, the Meridian, proved surprisingly enjoyable. Free from the tension of married life and the pressure of maintaining appearances for a social circle that had judged them harshly, the men revealed sides of themselves I'd never fully appreciated during our couple's dinners at the Pines Country Club. James, always the quietest of the group, displayed a dry wit that had me laughing until my sides ached. Thomas waxed poetic about architectural wonders we might see at our port stops, his academic knowledge infused with genuine passion. Robert, freed from Amanda's constant criticism, relaxed visibly with each course, eventually sharing hilarious stories from his early tech startup days. And Eric watched me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher, something between curiosity and nostalgia. Over dessert, a spectacular chocolate soufflé that had us all groaning with pleasure, Robert raised an unexpected question. "So, Becca," he said, setting down his spoon, "what exactly are you hoping to accomplish with this trip? Beyond the obvious, shock value of the photos." I considered the question carefully, aware that all 4 men were now watching me intently. "Honestly? I'm not entirely sure," I admitted. When I first heard them talking about me being too old, I was hurt. Then, angry. This plan started as a way to show them I wasn't just going to disappear quietly. I took a sip of my dessert wine before continuing. But now that we're actually here, I realize this trip is more about me than them. About reclaiming something I've lost, maybe joy, maybe spontaneity, maybe just the belief that I'm worthy of celebration exactly as I am. Thomas nodded thoughtfully. I understand that. After Olivia left, I felt invisible, like I'd suddenly become a non-person in our social circle. Amanda made sure everyone knew I was the villain in our separation, Robert added. Nobody bothered to ask for my side of the story. Natalie reinvented herself so completely after our divorce that sometimes I wonder if the woman I was married to for 15 years ever existed at all, James mused. We all turned to Eric, expecting his contribution to this moment of vulnerability. He hesitated, then said simply, "I think we all lost parts of ourselves in those relationships. Maybe this trip is about finding them again." A comfortable silence settled over the table, broken only when our server arrived to offer coffee. We declined, opting instead for a stroll around the deck to enjoy the warm evening air and star-filled sky. As we walked, Robert received a notification on his phone. He glanced at it, then broke into laughter. "What?" I asked, curious. "Amanda just texted me asking if I'm on a cruise with you. Apparently, your Instagram strategy is working." He showed me the screen. The message read, "Are you seriously on a cruise with Becca right now? What the hell, Robert?" "What are you going to say?" Thomas asked, peering over my shoulder at the text. Robert grinned. "Nothing yet. Let her stew for a while." My own phone, which I'd silenced earlier, was undoubtedly filling with similar messages. I was tempted to check but resisted. Tomorrow would be time enough for that. Tonight was for savoring. This unexpected camaraderie and the gentle rocking of the ship as it carried us farther from shore and closer to something that felt remarkably like freedom. The next morning, I awoke to sunlight streaming through my suite windows and the gentle sound of waves against the ship's hull. For a moment, I lay still, appreciating the luxurious comfort of my king-sized bed and the absolute absence of demands on my time. No client meetings to prep for, no social obligations to navigate, no uncomfortable group dynamics to manage. Just a day of possibilities stretching before me. My phone, which I'd left on silent overnight, showed dozens of notifications when I finally checked it. Comments on the Instagram posts, direct messages from mutual acquaintances, and texts from all 4 of my former friends. I skimmed them quickly. From Megan, "Becca, what are you doing? Call me ASAP." From Natalie, "Is that James with you? Are you with our exes?" From Olivia, "This is beyond inappropriate. Thomas has no right to be socializing with our friends." From Amanda, "I can't believe you would do this. You know Robert and I are still working things out." I smiled, set the phone aside, and ordered room service breakfast to enjoy on my private balcony. The warm morning air carried a hint of salt as I sipped my coffee and watched seabirds wheeling against the cloudless sky. Let them wait for answers. I had a massage scheduled in 30 minutes. By mid-morning, we had all congregated at one of the ship's adults-only pools, an elegant space with private cabanas, attentive service, and unobstructed ocean views. The men had secured a prime location with 2 adjacent cabanas, complete with plush loungers and a dedicated server bringing cold drinks at regular intervals. "You've been busy," I commented to James as he handed me a fruity concoction garnished with pineapple and a tiny paper umbrella. "Perks of being an early riser," he replied with a wink. "The early vacationer catches the best cabana." Thomas emerged from the pool, water streaming from his unexpectedly toned physique. "Ocean temperature is perfect," he announced, reaching for a towel. "Who's joining me for the snorkeling excursion this afternoon?" We all agreed enthusiastically, and Robert pulled out a tablet to show us details of the coral reef we'd be exploring. As he swiped through stunning underwater photos, I noticed Eric watching me, his expression thoughtful. "What?" I asked quietly when the others were distracted. "You look happy," he said simply. "It suits you." Before I could respond, my phone chimed with an incoming call. Natalie's name flashed on the screen. I showed it to Eric, who raised an eyebrow. "Are you going to answer?" I considered for a moment, then declined the call. "Not yet. The timing isn't right." "What would make the timing right?" he asked, curious rather than judgmental. I thought about it, watching a sailboat glide along the horizon. "When I'm ready to have that conversation without anger or hurt, clouding my judgment. When I can speak from a place of strength rather than reaction." Eric nodded, a glimmer of respect in his eyes. "You really have changed." "Is that good or bad?" I asked lightly. "Good," he said without hesitation. "Very good." Our snorkeling excursion that afternoon was nothing short of magical. The reef teemed with life, vibrant corals in impossible shapes, fish of every color darting through crystal clear water, even a sea turtle that glided past us with serene indifference to our presence. I had never seen anything so beautiful, so untouched by human concerns or judgments. Floating in that underwater paradise, watching sunlight filter through the water in dancing patterns, I felt a profound shift within myself. The hurt and anger that had propelled this trip began to dissolve, replaced by genuine gratitude for this unexpected adventure and the companions who shared it. Back on the ship, we gathered for sunset cocktails at the Starlight Lounge, all of us slightly sunburned and exhilarated from our afternoon in the water. Thomas had brought his professional camera and was showing us the underwater photos he'd captured. "This one's my favorite," he said, displaying an image of me suspended in blue water, arms outstretched, face turned toward the surface, where light filtered down in golden rays. The joy on my face was unmistakable. "Mine too," said a voice behind us. We turned to find a distinguished-looking man in his early 50s observing our group with friendly interest. He was tall, with silver-streaked dark hair and intelligent eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "Leo Garcia," he introduced himself with a slight bow. "Cruise director. I hope you're enjoying your voyage so far." We assured him we were, and to my surprise, he pulled up a chair to join us. "I hope you don't mind my intrusion," he said, accepting the drink Robert offered. "But I must admit, your group has sparked considerable curiosity among the staff." "How so?" "James Stutz asked, amused. Leo gestured around our table. "It's not every day we see 5 divorced individuals vacationing together, especially when I understand some of you were previously married to each other." I laughed, realizing how bizarre our arrangement must seem to outsiders. "News travels fast on a cruise ship." "Like wildfire," Leo agreed good-naturedly. "But don't worry, we're professionals. Your privacy is respected. I'm simply intrigued on a personal level." "Let me guess," Thomas said, leaning forward. "You're wondering if we're filming some kind of reality show?" Leo laughed. The thought did cross my mind. We've hosted several television productions over the years. "Nothing so dramatic," I assured him, though the story behind this trip probably would make good television. As our conversation with Leo continued, I found myself genuinely enjoying his company. Unlike the calculated social interactions I'd grown accustomed to in Lakeview Heights, where everyone seemed to be constantly positioning themselves within the community hierarchy, Leo's interest felt authentic. He shared stories from his 15 years as a cruise director, celebrity encounters, maritime mishaps, unexpected romances that blossomed at sea. "The ocean changes people," he observed, swirling the ice in his drink. "Something about the endless horizon and the distance from everyday life allows us to see ourselves differently, even if just for a while." "That's exactly what we needed," I said, glancing around at my companions, a change in perspective. As the evening progressed, more passengers joined our expanding circle. A retired couple from Seattle who were celebrating their 40th anniversary. A group of nurses on a well-deserved vacation after 2 grueling years in pandemic medicine. A novelist researching her next book. Each brought new energy and stories to our table, and I found myself thinking how refreshing it was to connect with people who had no preconceived notions about me, no expectations based on a shared history. Among the newcomers was Harrison Weber, a divorced father traveling with his teenage children. He pulled up a chair beside me during a lull in the conversation, introducing himself with a warm handshake that lingered just long enough to suggest interest beyond mere politeness. "Your group seems to be having more fun than anyone else on this ship," he observed, his voice a pleasant baritone with a hint of a southern accent. "We're celebrating freedom," I replied, surprising myself with the truth in those words. "Freedom," from Soccer he prompted, "expectations, limitations, other people's narratives about who we are and what we deserve." I took a sip of my drink, wondering if that sounded too philosophical for cruise ship small talk, but Harrison nodded thoughtfully. "I understand that completely. After my divorce, the hardest part wasn't being alone. It was realizing how much of my self-perception had been shaped by someone else's view of me." "Exactly," I said, feeling an unexpected connection with this stranger. "So, what brought you on this cruise?" "My kids," he said, gesturing across the lounge where 2 teenagers, a boy and a girl, were engrossed in their phones. "They live with their mother most of the time. These trips are our chance to reconnect." His expression softened. "They're good kids, just at that age where dad isn't exactly cool anymore." "I remember those days," I said, thinking of Sophia at 16, rolling her eyes at everything Eric and I said. "My daughter's 21 now. It gets better." "That's reassuring," he said with a grin that transformed his face from merely handsome to magnetic. "So, mysterious cruise lady, are you going to tell me the real story behind your unusual travel group? Because whatever it is, it seems to be causing quite a stir." He nodded toward his phone, which displayed a social media feed where our group photo was visible, already being shared among mutual connections. I laughed, realizing our private Instagram account had already transcended its intended audience. "That's a story that requires at least another drink to tell properly." Harrison signaled the server, his eyes never leaving mine. "I've got all evening." And so, as the stars emerged above the Caribbean Sea and the ship continued its steady progress through dark waters, I found myself recounting the tale of friendship, betrayal, and creative revenge to a man whose warm attention felt like spring, sunshine after a long winter. The conversation flowed effortlessly, punctuated by genuine laughter and moments of surprising vulnerability, as Harrison shared his own stories of post-divorce reinvention. When we finally parted ways several hours later, exchanging cabin numbers with promises to meet for tomorrow's island excursion, I realized I hadn't checked my phone once since he'd joined me. The messages from my former friends, the curious, comments on the Instagram posts, the drama unfolding back home, none of it seemed particularly important anymore. This trip, conceived in hurt and planned in vengeance, was evolving into something completely unexpected. Something that felt remarkably like the beginning of a new chapter, rather than the settling of an old score. The morning of our 3rd day, on the Caribbean Paradise cruise dawned with perfect clarity, the sky a seamless expanse of blue stretching from horizon to horizon. I woke early, drawn to my private balcony by the changing quality of light filtering through the curtains. Wrapped in the plush robe provided by the cruise line, I sipped my morning coffee and watched the sun climb higher, casting golden reflections across the gentle waves. We would be docking at our first island destination today, a small paradise, known for its pristine beaches and vibrant local culture. The previous evening, over dinner, we had decided to forego the organized excursions in favor of exploring on our own. Harrison had mentioned knowing a secluded beach accessible only by a hiking trail, far from the typical tourist spots. He'd invited all of us to join him and his teenagers, an offer we'd enthusiastically accepted. My phone, which I deliberately avoided checking since the previous afternoon, now showed dozens of missed calls and messages. The Instagram posts had clearly achieved their intended effect. I scrolled through quickly, noting the increasingly urgent tone of my former friend's communications. Natalie had progressed from confusion to indignation. "James says you're all on some kind of healing cruise together? This is beyond inappropriate, Becca." Olivia's messages were predictably dramatic. "I can't believe you would stoop so low. Thomas has absolutely no right to be socializing with our friend group after what he did to me." Megan, always the diplomat, attempted a more measured approach. "I think we should talk about this, Becca. There seems to be some misunderstanding. Call me, please." Amanda's reaction was the most interesting. A single message sent at 3:47 a.m. "I get it now. Point taken. But did you have to include Robert?" I considered responding, then decided against it. There would be time for conversations later, when I was ready to have them on my terms. For now, I silenced my phone again and began preparing for our island adventure. We gathered at the ship's main exit as passengers began disembarking, a motley crew of divorcees and new acquaintances. Harrison and his teenagers, Ella and Max, joined us promptly at 9, looking ready for a day of exploration. Ella, at 16, maintained the carefully cultivated indifference typical of her age, though I caught her studying our unusual group with poorly concealed curiosity. 14-year-old Max was more openly engaged, particularly when he learned that Robert had worked for several prominent tech companies and had stories about the early days of social media platforms. "You guys are like what, a divorce support group or something?" Ella finally asked as we made our way down the gangplank. Harrison winced slightly. "Ella, that's not far off," I interrupted with a laugh. "Though we prefer to think of ourselves as a second chance coalition." Ella's carefully maintained facade cracked slightly. "That's kind of cool, actually. Most of Mom's friends just sit around drinking wine and complaining about men." "We drink wine and complain too," Thomas assured her with a wink. "But we also go snorkeling and take revenge cruises." This elicited a genuine smile from the teenager, and I sensed the beginning of what might be an unexpectedly enjoyable day for all of us. Harrison led our group away from the crowded port area, past colorful market stalls and eager tour operators, until we reached the edge of a nature preserve. A barely visible trail wound upward through lush tropical vegetation. "It's about a 40-minute hike," he explained, distributing bottles of water from his backpack. "Mostly gentle, but there's one steeper section near the end. The view at the top makes it worth it, I promise." The trail took us through a world of sensory abundance, vibrant flowers releasing their heady perfume into the humid air, unseen birds calling from the canopy above, dappled sunlight creating patterns on the forest floor. As we walked, our group naturally separated into smaller conversational clusters that shifted and reformed throughout the journey. I found myself beside Eric for a stretch of the path, our steps falling into a synchronized rhythm that felt both familiar and new. This reminds me of that hike we took in Costa Rica," he commented, ducking under a low-hanging branch. "The one where you insisted we didn't need a guide, and we got completely lost for 3 hours?" I replied, smiling at the memory. He laughed, softly. In my defense, the map was in Spanish, which you claim to speak fluently. I may have exaggerated my linguistic abilities slightly. His expression grew more thoughtful. We had some good times, didn't we? Despite everything that came later. I considered his words as we navigated a particularly rocky section of trail. We did, I acknowledged. I think that's why the end was so painful. You don't mourn what you never valued. Eric nodded, his gaze fixed on the path ahead. For what it's worth, Becca, I've regretted how things ended between us. Not the divorce itself, we were making each other miserable by then, but the way we let bitterness erase all the good memories. It was perhaps the most honest conversation we'd had in years, unencumbered by lawyers or the weight of failing to save something once precious to us both. Before I could respond, Harrison circled back to join us, pointing out a rare orchid growing alongside the trail. The moment passed, but something had shifted between Eric and me. Not a rekindling, but perhaps the beginning of a more genuine friendship. The trail eventually opened onto a spectacular view, a crescent of white sand embraced by turquoise water so clear we could see fish darting between coral formations, even from our elevated vantage point. A steep path zigzagged down to the beach, which was completely deserted, save for a few seabirds patrolling the shoreline. Coral Beach, Harrison announced with quiet pride. No roads lead here, and the local tour operators don't include it in their routes because the hike discourages most cruise passengers. It's incredible, I breathed, taking in the pristine scene below us. Worth the hike? Harrison asked, his smile warming something long dormant within me. Absolutely. We made our way down to the beach, establishing our base under the shade of several palm trees. The men immediately headed for the water, while Ella spread her towel and arranged herself for optimal tanning. Max pulled out a paperback but kept glancing longingly toward the water, where Robert was demonstrating some kind of elaborate dive. He's really into marine biology, Harrison explained, noticing my gaze. But he's at that age where admitting interest in anything seems uncool. Go, I encouraged. Take him snorkeling. I'm happy to lounge here with Ella for a while. Harrison hesitated. You're sure? Positive. Father-son time is precious. I waved him off, settling onto my beach towel and pulling out the novel I'd brought along. After a few minutes of pretending to read while actually enjoying the spectacular view, I noticed Ella stealing glances in my direction. Something on your mind? I asked gently. She shrugged with studied casualness. Not really. Just wondering about your whole situation with all these ex-husbands. I smiled. It's certainly unconventional. My mom would never do something like this, she continued. She's still so angry at Dad, even though the divorce was like 3 years ago. I considered my response carefully. Divorce is complicated. Everyone processes it differently. But you're not angry at your ex? Even though you're on this trip to make your friends jealous? Her directness was refreshing. The trip started as a reaction to feeling excluded and hurt, I admitted. But it's becoming something else entirely. Like what? Like a reminder that life doesn't end when relationships do. That there are always new connections to be made, new experiences to enjoy. I gestured toward the crystal waters. New beaches to discover. Ella nodded slowly. That's actually pretty wise. For someone almost 50? I teased. Her eyes widened. I didn't mean... I'm kidding, I assured her. Age jokes are fair game when you've been excluded from a trip for being too old. This earned a genuine laugh. Your friends sound kind of awful. They weren't always, I mused. But relationships evolve, sometimes in unexpected directions. Like you becoming friends with your ex-husband? Exactly like that. We lapsed into comfortable silence, Ella returning to her music and me to my book. By the time the men and Max returned from their snorkeling adventure, faces flushed with excitement and stories of spotted eagle rays and colorful parrotfish, I had read exactly 3 pages and thought more deeply about friendship, forgiveness, and fresh starts than I had in months. Harrison produced a simple but perfect picnic lunch from his backpack: sandwiches, fruit, and cold drinks. We ate in the shade, sharing stories and laughter as if we'd been friends for years rather than days. Thomas entertained us with architectural anecdotes about the island's colonial history, while James, to everyone's surprise, revealed a hidden talent for palm frond weaving, creating intricate animals for an impressed Max. After lunch, Robert insisted on taking group photos with the professional camera he'd brought. "For your Instagram revenge plot," he explained with a wink. We arranged ourselves on the pristine beach, 5 adults and 2 teenagers, windswept and sun-kissed, genuinely happy in that perfect moment. Looking at us, no one would have guessed the complicated histories intertwining through our group. We simply looked like friends enjoying paradise together. "These will definitely cause a stir," Robert commented as he reviewed the photos on his camera's display screen. "Do you think that still matters?" I asked, surprising myself with the question. He looked up, studying my expression. "Having second thoughts about Operation make them jealous?" I considered this as I watched Harrison teaching Max how to skip stones across a tidal pool. Not second thoughts exactly. More like evolving motivations. When we planned this trip, I wanted to prove something to them. Now I'm not sure their opinions matter as much as I thought. Robert nodded thoughtfully. "I get that. I came on this cruise partly to spite Amanda, but I'm actually having a legitimately good time. Better than any vacation we took together during our marriage, if I'm honest. Maybe that's the real revenge, finding joy without them," I suggested. "Deep, Mitchell, very deep." He grinned, then grew more serious. "You know, Amanda was always a bit intimidated by you." "By me? Why?" "Your confidence, your success, the way you built your design business from scratch while maintaining this perfect image of having it all together." He shrugged. "She admired you, but it made her feel inadequate sometimes." This perspective was entirely new to me. I'd always seen Amanda as supremely self-assured, perhaps even arrogant in her certainty about how life should be lived. The idea that she might have harbored insecurities about our friendship shifted something in my understanding of our relationship. "I had no idea," I admitted. "People rarely do," Robert replied, turning back to his camera. "We're all so busy, hiding our own vulnerabilities that we miss them in others." The hike back to the port area was quieter, everyone pleasantly tired from a day of sun and sea. As we approached the more developed part of the island, our phones began chiming with returning service. I ignored mine, preferring to remain in the peaceful bubble we'd created, at least until we returned to the ship. We said goodbye to Harrison and his children at the port entrance. They were staying on the island overnight at a small boutique hotel Harrison had discovered years earlier. We made plans to meet for dinner the following evening back on the ship, an arrangement that left me with a flutter of anticipation I hadn't felt in years. "Thank you for today," I told him as we parted. "It was perfect. The best days usually aren't planned," he replied, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "They just happen when the right people find each other at the right time." I carried his words with me as we reboarded the Caribbean paradise, the enormous vessel somehow feeling more like home after just 2 nights aboard. We agreed to meet at the Starlight Lounge after refreshing from our day ashore, and I returned to my suite to find a bottle of champagne and a basket of tropical fruit waiting. A thoughtful gesture from the cruise director, Leo, with a note suggesting we might enjoy them during our departure from the island. In the privacy of my suite, I finally checked my phone. Among the messages from my former friends was one that stood out, a direct message from Cassie, Eric's daughter from his first marriage. Though technically my former stepdaughter, We had maintained a warm relationship despite the divorce, until Eric's lawyers had discouraged contact during the more contentious phase of our separation. "Becca," her message read, "I've been seeing the cruise photos. It looks amazing, and so do you. I've missed you. Could we grab coffee when you're back? There's so much I want to tell you." Her message brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Cassie had been 20 when Eric and I married, initially resistant to her father's new relationship, but eventually warming to me as we discovered shared interests in design and art. She had been caught in the crossfire of our divorce, her loyalty to her father naturally taking precedence over our fragile friendship. I responded immediately. "I've missed you too, Cassie. Coffee sounds perfect. I'll be back next Wednesday. How about Thursday morning at our old spot?" Her reply came seconds later. "Already on my calendar. Can't wait to hear about this cruise with Dad and the ex-husbands club." I smiled, realizing that this trip was creating ripples I hadn't anticipated. Reopening channels of communication that had been closed, offering opportunities for reconciliation in unexpected places. The revenge plot was transforming into something far more meaningful than I had imagined when booking those 5 premium suites. After a refreshing shower, I dressed for the evening in one of my new purchases, a flowing maxi dress in shades of turquoise and coral that echoed the colors of the island we were leaving behind. The personal shopper had insisted it was perfect for my coloring, and seeing my reflection now, I had to admit she was right. The woman looking back at me seemed vibrant, confident, and decidedly not too old for anything. The ship's horn sounded as I was applying a final touch of lip color, signaling our departure from the island. I stepped onto my balcony to watch as we slowly pulled away from the dock, the lush green landscape receding as we moved back into open water. The sun was beginning its descent, painting the sky in spectacular oranges and pinks that reflected off the sea's surface. I brought the champagne and fruit outside, creating my own private departure celebration. As I poured a glass of the bubbly liquid, I raised it in a silent toast, not to revenge or petty satisfaction, but to unexpected journeys and the courage to embrace them. The Starlight Lounge was buzzing with energy when I arrived. A jazz quartet played in one corner, their mellow tones providing the perfect soundtrack for sunset cocktails. James waved me over to a table he'd secured near the windows, where Thomas and Robert were already engaged in animated conversation about their island adventures. "Where's Eric?" I asked, settling into the remaining chair. "Meeting with someone." "From the ship's engineering department," Thomas explained. "Apparently they got to talking about maritime law at breakfast, and now the guy's asking for legal advice about some property dispute back home." "Classic Eric," I laughed. "Always working, even on vacation." "Speaking of work," James said, pushing a folder across the table toward me. "I hope you don't mind, but I showed some photos of your design projects to a couple we met at dinner last night. They're building a vacation home in Aspen and are looking for an interior designer who understands mountain modern aesthetics." I opened the folder to find printouts of my website portfolio, along with a handwritten note from prospective clients requesting a consultation when they returned home to Seattle, which happened to be where my daughter Sophia was attending university. "James, this is..." I was momentarily at a loss for words. "Thank you." He shrugged, looking slightly embarrassed. "Natalie always said your talent was wasted on our provincial suburb. These people have the budget to let you really showcase what you can do." The mention of Natalie created a momentary awkwardness, quickly dispelled when Robert raised his glass. "To Becca's expanding business empire. May it stretch from coast to coast." "And to James," I added, genuinely touched by his thoughtfulness. "Networking extraordinaire." As we clinked glasses, I realized that these men, whom I'd known for years, but only as extensions of their marriages, were revealing themselves to be far more complex and interesting than I'd ever appreciated. James's quiet perceptiveness, Thomas's passionate knowledge, Robert's surprising depth, and even Eric's steadfast reliability. all qualities that somehow became more apparent in the aftermath of their marriages. The evening evolved into a delightful blend of reminiscence and new discoveries. We shared stories from the early days of our acquaintance: cocktail parties at the Pines Country Club, community fundraisers, neighborhood barbecues, now seeing those shared memories through the lens of our current perspectives. Remember that 4th of July when Megan insisted we all wear coordinating outfits? Thomas asked, chuckling at the memory. Red, white, and blue by couple. Olivia and I were assigned blue. And Natalie threw a fit because she wanted blue, not white, James added. Said white made her look washed out. Amanda and I got red, Robert recalled. She was furious because she'd just bought an expensive green dress she wanted to wear. Eric and I had white, I remembered. He complained about spilling something on it all day. We laughed together, the memory no longer tinged with the bitterness that might have colored it just days earlier. There was something freeing about acknowledging the absurdities we'd all participated in for the sake of maintaining our social standing in Lakeview Heights. As the evening progressed, Leo joined our table again, this time accompanied by several other cruise staff members who seemed genuinely interested in our unusual group. The conversation flowed easily, touching on everything from travel recommendations to career changes to philosophical musings about life's unexpected turns. I have a theory, Leo said as the jazz quartet took a break. The most interesting people are those who have survived significant disappointments with their sense of curiosity intact. I'll drink to that, Thomas agreed, raising his glass. It's about resilience, one of the other staff members, a woman named Maya who ran the ship's art auctions, suggested. Not just bouncing back, but bouncing forward into something new. Bouncing forward, I repeated, liking the phrase. That's exactly what this trip has become for me. For all of us, Robert added. When Becca first proposed this cruise, I saw it mainly as a way to annoy Amanda. Now I'm actually thinking about what I want the next chapter of my life to look like. Is annoying your ex-wife not a sufficient life goal? James deadpanned, causing a burst of laughter around the table. It's a noble start, Thomas assured him, but perhaps lacking in long-term satisfaction. Eric appeared just then, looking pleased with himself as he joined our expanding circle. Guess who just got invited to give a guest lecture on maritime? Law to the ship's officers tomorrow? Only you could turn a revenge cruise into a networking opportunity, I teased. He grinned, unrepentant. Multitasking is my superpower. As the evening deepened into night, our group gradually dispersed. The staff members returned to their duties. James and Thomas decided to try their luck at the casino, and Robert excused himself to call his son before it got too late back home. Eric lingered, nursing his scotch as we watched the moonlight create a silver path across the dark water visible through the lounge windows. You're different on this trip, he observed, after a comfortable silence. Different how? Lighter. More yourself. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass. It reminds me of when we first met before. Before life got complicated? I suggested. He nodded. Before I made it complicated. I wasn't sure how to respond to this unexpected acknowledgement of his role in our marriage's dissolution. During our divorce, Eric had maintained that we had simply grown apart, that neither of us was to blame for the relationship's failure. This was the first time he'd indicated any acceptance of responsibility. We both contributed, I said finally. That's generous of you. His expression was rueful. But we both know I checked out long before you did. Buried myself in work, avoided the hard conversations. Why are you bringing this up now? I asked, curious rather than defensive. He considered the question, gazing out at the moonlit ocean. Seeing you these past few days, how you've moved forward, how you're embracing new experiences, it's made me reflect on what I gave up. Not just our marriage, but the partnership we had. The friendship. "We could still be friends, Eric," I said softly. "Real ones, not just polite exes who coordinate holiday visits with our daughter." He smiled, the tension in his shoulders visibly easing. "I'd like that. I've missed your perspective on things, your honesty. And I've missed your terrible jokes and surprisingly good taste in wine." We shared a genuine laugh, and for the first time since our separation, I felt the possibility of a new kind of relationship with the man who had once been the center of my world. Not a rekindling of romance, but the preservation of the connection that had drawn us together in the first place. Mutual respect, shared history, and the understanding that comes from having once known someone deeply. As we parted ways for the night, Eric heading to the casino to join the others and I returning to my suite, I realized that this cruise, conceived in hurt and planned in vengeance, was becoming a journey of reconciliation in ways I never could have anticipated. Not just with my former husband, but with parts of myself I had allowed to go dormant during the painful years of my marriage's slow collapse and the aftermath of its end. Back in my suite, I opened the balcony doors to let in the fresh sea air. The night was perfect, warm with a gentle breeze, the sky a canopy of stars unmarred by city lights. I leaned against the railing, breathing deeply and feeling profoundly grateful for this unexpected turning point in my life. My phone chimed with a notification. Harrison had sent a message. "Dinner tomorrow at the Meridian, 7:30? Just the two of us?" I typed my response without hesitation, looking forward to it. Setting the phone aside, I returned my gaze to the vast horizon where sea met sky. The Caribbean paradise continued its smooth journey through the night, carrying us all toward destinations unknown, but suddenly rich with possibility. For the first time in years, I wasn't focused on what I had lost or what had hurt me. Instead, I was filled with curiosity about what might lie ahead. New friendships, new professional opportunities, perhaps even new love. The Instagram revenge plot that had motivated this trip now seemed almost childish in comparison to what I had gained in just 3 days at sea. A renewed sense of self, unexpected connections, and the liberating knowledge that the end of one chapter truly could be the beginning of something even better. The remainder of our cruise unfolded like a beautiful dream. Days filled with island explorations, delicious meals, and genuine laughter. Evenings of intimate conversations and spectacular sunsets. My dinner with Harrison at the Meridian proved to be everything I'd hoped for, a genuine connection between two people discovering unexpected compatibility in the wake of past disappointments. We shared stories of our former marriages, our children, our professional challenges, and our tentative hopes for the future. There was no pressure, no agenda, just the pleasure of getting to know someone whose perspective on life resonated with my own. Meanwhile, our unusual cruise group had become something of a legend among the ship's passengers and crew. Leo, the cruise director, informed us that we were being discussed at staff meetings as the most interesting passenger story of the season. "You've inspired quite a few people," he told me one afternoon as we chatted by the pool. "Especially some of our recently divorced passengers who've been watching your group with fascination." "We're hardly role models for healthy post-divorce relationships," I laughed, gesturing toward Robert and James, who were engaged in an increasingly competitive game of shuffleboard. "I disagree," Leo said, his expression thoughtful. "You've shown that there's life after divorce, that it's possible to move beyond bitterness to something more constructive. That's a powerful message." I hadn't considered our impromptu vacation in those terms, but as I observed our group, I realized he might be right. We had all arrived on this cruise carrying different wounds from our failed marriages. Yet here we were, genuinely enjoying each other's company, finding new connections, and perhaps most importantly, rediscovering parts of ourselves that had been overshadowed by the pain of the past. The Instagram posts continued throughout the trip, though their purpose had subtly shifted. What began as a pointed message to my former friends evolved into a genuine celebration of this unexpected journey. The carefully staged photos gave way to authentic moments of joy. James teaching a group of children the art of palm frond weaving on a beach, Thomas sketching colonial architecture in a quaint island town, Robert and Max discovering a rare shell during their snorkeling adventure, Eric laughing openly during an impromptu dance lesson on deck. The responses from back home evolved as well. The initial shock and indignation from my former friends gradually transformed into something more complex. Natalie's messages grew less accusatory and more reflective. Olivia's dramatic protests subsided into an uncharacteristic silence. Megan continued her diplomatic overtures, though the tone shifted from damage control to genuine concern about our friendship. Amanda's single acknowledgement remained her only communication, though Robert mentioned she had reached out to him with questions about the cruise that seemed motivated by genuine curiosity rather than anger. On our final night at sea, we gathered at the Starlight Lounge for a farewell celebration. Harrison and his children joined us, as did Leo and several other cruise staff members who had become friends during our voyage. The atmosphere was bittersweet, the joy of the present moment tempered by the knowledge that tomorrow would bring a return to reality, with all its complications and responsibilities. "A toast," James proposed, raising his glass as the ship's jazz quartet played softly in the background. "To unexpected journeys and the courage to embark on them." "To second chances," Thomas added, his gaze meeting mine with warm understanding. "To rewriting our own stories," Robert contributed. "To friendship without expiration dates," Eric said, nodding toward me with a smile that held no trace of our former bitterness. "To discovery," Harrison added, his hand finding mine beneath the table. I raised my glass, emotion tightening my throat as I looked around at these people who had become so important to me in just a few days. To all of us, exactly as we are. As conversations flowed around me, I slipped away to the deck for a moment of quiet reflection. The night was perfect, velvety darkness above, the ship's lights reflecting on the gentle waves below, and a canopy of stars stretching to the horizon. I leaned against the railing, breathing in the salt-tinged air and trying to fix this moment. In my memory, the feeling of absolute contentment, of having found my footing after years of uncertainty. "Penny for your thoughts," came Eric's voice as he joined me at the railing. I smiled, not surprised that he had noticed my absence. For all our differences, he had always been attuned to my moods. "I was just thinking about how differently this trip turned out than I expected," I admitted. "When I invited you all on this cruise, I was hurt and angry. I wanted to make a point. And instead," he prompted, "instead, I found something I wasn't even looking for." I gestured toward the lounge where our friends were visible through the windows. Connection, joy, possibility. Eric nodded, his expression thoughtful as he gazed out at the dark water. "I've been thinking about our conversation on the hiking trail, about good memories getting buried under the weight of how things ended." "I remember." "I meant what I said, Becca. I regret how bitter things got between us." He turned to face me fully. "Watching you these past few days, seeing you laugh and open up to new experiences, even seeing you connect with Harrison, it's made me realize how much of our history I've been viewing through the lens of our divorce, rather than the good years we had before things went wrong." I studied his face, noting the sincerity in his eyes. "What are you saying, Eric?" "I'm saying I'd like us to be friends again. Real friends, not just cordial exes who exchange pleasantries when Sophia comes home for holidays." He hesitated, then added, "I miss having you in my life, Becca. Not as my wife, that chapter is closed for both of us, but as someone who knew me better than anyone for 15 years. The vulnerability in his admission touched me deeply. This was a side of Eric I hadn't seen in years, The open, emotionally honest man I had fallen in love with before career ambitions and unmet expectations had hardened him into someone I barely recognized. "I'd like that too," I said softly. "I think Sophia would be thrilled if we could actually enjoy family dinners again instead of maintaining that stiff politeness we've perfected." He laughed, the tension visibly leaving his shoulders. "She'd be suspicious at first. Probably think we were plotting something. Or getting back together," I added with a smile. She went through a phase right after the divorce where she kept leaving wedding magazines around the house with renewal ceremony pages marked. "She did the same thing at my place." Eric shook his head, chuckling. "Our daughter, the eternal optimist." "She gets that from you," I said, remembering how Eric's natural confidence had once been one of his most attractive qualities. He raised an eyebrow. "Really? I always thought her resilience came from you. The way you rebuilt your life after everything. Your business, your social connections, your sense of self. That's all you, Becca." His words warmed something deep within me. Not the ember of old love, but the simpler glow of being truly seen and appreciated. A comfortable silence settled between us as we watched the moonlight on the waves. After a moment, Eric spoke again, his tone lighter. "So, Harrison seems like a good guy." "He is," I confirmed, unable to contain a small smile. "It's early days, but there's definitely potential." "I'm glad." His sincerity surprised me. "You deserve someone who appreciates all of you, not just the parts that fit neatly into his life." Before I could respond, Harrison appeared in the doorway, his expression apologetic. "Sorry to interrupt, but the kids are getting tired, and we thought we'd say goodnight." Eric straightened, extending his hand. "Harrison, good to see you. I was just heading back inside myself." He gave my shoulder a gentle squeeze before walking away, leaving Harrison and me alone on the moonlit deck. "Everything okay?" Harrison asked, joining me at the railing. "Better than okay," I said, watching Eric's retreating figure with a newfound appreciation for the complexity of shared history. "Just making peace with the past." Harrison nodded, his expression understanding. "That's important work." "It is," I agreed. "But I'm finding I'm more interested in the future these days." His smile deepened, crinkling the corners of his eyes in the way I had come to adore. I liked the sound of that. We stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars and feeling the gentle movement of the ship beneath us. Tomorrow would bring the end of this cruise and the beginning of whatever came next. For the first time in years, I faced that unknown future with eager anticipation rather than anxiety. The ship docked early the next morning, the process of disembarkation, a stark contrast to the dreamlike quality of our days at sea. Suddenly, we were back in the real world of luggage carts, customs forms, and transportation arrangements. Our group gathered one last time in the terminal, exchanging contact information and promises to stay in touch. "Brunch next Sunday at my place," James insisted, inputting the date into all of our phones. "I'm making my famous crab cakes, and I won't take no for an answer." Thomas confirmed our dinner plans for Wednesday, eager to introduce me to a colleague who needed design consultation for a historical renovation project. Robert extracted promises from everyone to attend his upcoming tech startup launch party. Eric reminded me about our coffee date with Cassie on Thursday. Harrison and I exchanged a more private goodbye, his children tactfully absorbed in their phones as he pulled me aside. "I had an amazing time," he said, his hands resting lightly on my waist. "And I'd very much like to see you again. Soon." "I'd like that too," I replied, surprising myself by reaching up to kiss him softly. He looked momentarily startled, then delighted. "I'll call you tonight?" "I'm counting on it." As our group finally dispersed, heading toward waiting cars and real-world responsibilities, I found myself standing alone for a moment, watching as the Caribbean paradise prepared for its next voyage. new passengers already beginning to board. The ship that had been our home for a transformative week would soon carry other people on their own journeys, perhaps changing their lives as profoundly as it had changed mine. The car Eric had arranged for me arrived, the driver efficiently loading my luggage. As we pulled away from the port, I allowed myself one last look at the majestic vessel gleaming in the morning sun. The Instagram revenge cruise had served its purpose, though not in the way I had initially intended. It had given me not the petty satisfaction of making others jealous, but the far more valuable gift of reconnection, with parts of myself I had forgotten, with friendships I had thought lost, and with the possibility of joy I had almost stopped believing in. The drive home gave me time to reflect on how I would handle the inevitable confrontation with my former friends. They would be waiting, of course. Natalie with her indignation, Olivia with her drama, Megan with her diplomatic attempts to smooth things over, Amanda with her quiet assessments. The group chat had been buzzing throughout the cruise, though I had largely ignored it, preferring to stay immersed in the experience rather than defending or explaining my actions. By the time the car pulled into my driveway, I had made a decision. I would not seek them out, nor would I avoid them. I would simply live my life authentically, without the constant awareness of their judgment that had unconsciously shaped so many of my choices over the years. If our friendship recovered, it would have to be on new terms, honest, equal, and free from the subtle hierarchy that had ultimately led to my exclusion. My house welcomed me with the familiar comfort of my own space, though it somehow seemed smaller after the expansive horizons of the ocean. I unpacked methodically, sorting laundry and arranging the souvenirs I had collected. A hand-carved wooden box from one island, a watercolor of a beach from another, a bottle of locally made rum with exotic spices. As I was hanging the last sundress in my closet, the doorbell rang. Taking a deep breath, I moved to answer it, somehow knowing who would be on the other side. Megan stood on my porch, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. Her perfectly highlighted hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore minimal makeup, a stark contrast to her usual polished appearance. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice lacking its usual confident tone. I hesitated only briefly before stepping aside to let her enter. We moved to the living room, settling onto opposite ends of the sofa where we had shared countless glasses of wine and confidences over the years. "You look good," she said after an awkward silence. "The cruise obviously agreed with you." "It did," I confirmed, waiting for her to get to the point. Megan fidgeted with her wedding ring, twisting it around her finger as she had always done, when nervous. "Becca, I owe you an apology. We all do." I said nothing, letting her find her own words. When we were planning the Napa trip, it started as just the four of us because Natalie needed to talk about some issues she's having with her new boyfriend. Things she wasn't comfortable discussing around you because... She trailed off, looking embarrassed. "Because I'm too old to understand dating drama?" I supplied calmly. She winced. "It sounds terrible when you say it like that." "It was terrible when you said it at Harbor Coffee," I replied, keeping my tone even. "You didn't think I could hear you, but I could. Every word." Megan's face flushed. "You were there? That day?" "Sitting right behind you. I heard Amanda say I'd bring down the vibe, and Olivia joke that I'd be in bed by 9. I heard you all agree that the annual trip was being rebranded as young girls only." To her credit, Megan looked genuinely mortified. "Becca, I'm so sorry. That conversation was awful, mean-spirited and childish. None of us are proud of it." I studied her, noting the genuine regret in her expression. "Why now, Megan? Why the apology after a week of messages I ignored?" She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Because your cruise posts made us all take a hard look at ourselves. You seemed so happy, so free, surrounded by people who appreciate you exactly as you are." She hesitated, then added, "And because Daniel saw the photos and asked why I wasn't on that cruise instead of going to Napa." When I explained, he said he was disappointed in me. He's right to be. I hadn't expected that. Megan's husband had always been peripheral to our friendship, content to let her maintain her social circle while he focused on his business. The Napa trip was... Megan seemed to struggle for words. It wasn't what any of us expected. We spent most of the time talking about you and your cruise posts, actually. Natalie was furious at first, then hurt, then just confused. Olivia fluctuated between outrage and envy. She kept saying how unfair it was that Thomas looked so happy. Amanda was quieter than usual, just watching our reactions with this strange expression. "And you?" I prompted. I felt ashamed. She admitted. "Seeing how much fun you were having with this group of people who clearly value you made me realize how petty we'd been. How we'd reduced our friendship, a decade of supporting each other through everything, to some ridiculous age. Hierarchy." Her honesty touched me, despite my lingering hurt. "I appreciate you coming here, Megan. It can't have been easy. Do you think you could ever forgive us?" she asked, vulnerability evident in her voice. "I know we don't deserve it, but I miss you, Becca. Our group isn't the same without you." I considered her question carefully, aware that my response would set the tone for whatever came next. "Forgiveness isn't the issue," I said finally. "I'm not angry anymore. But trust, that's different. Trust requires rebuilding." She nodded, accepting this. "Will you give us the chance to try? Maybe coffee next week? Just to talk?" Part of me wanted to refuse, to protect the newfound peace I had discovered on the cruise. But another part recognized that relationships, worth having, sometimes require the courage to be vulnerable again after being hurt. "Coffee," I agreed. "But I need you to understand something, Megan. I've changed. This past week helped me see that I've been tailoring myself to fit our group's expectations for years, moderating my opinions, downplaying my successes, accepting subtle put-downs disguised as humor. I can't do that anymore. I wouldn't want you to," she said quietly. "The Becca on that cruise, the one smiling so authentically in those photos, that's who I want in my life." After Megan left, promising to arrange our coffee meetup, I felt an unexpected lightness. The confrontation I had been anticipating had instead become a step toward possible reconciliation, not on the old terms, but on new ones built on mutual respect rather than conformity. I spent the rest of the day catching up on work emails and preparing for my return to the design studio tomorrow. Just as I was considering what to make for dinner, my phone rang with Sophia's ringtone. "Mom!" she exclaimed the moment I answered. "I've been seeing your cruise photos all over my social feeds. What exactly did you do?" I laughed, hearing the mixture of shock and admiration in my daughter's voice. "It's a long story, sweetheart." "I've got time," she insisted, "and Dad's being super mysterious about it. He just keeps saying I should ask you." "How about dinner tomorrow night? I'll tell you everything then." "Is it true you're dating someone? Cassie showed me a photo of you with some silver fox on a beach." I smiled, thinking of Harrison and our plans to have dinner when he returned from settling his children back with their mother. That's definitely part of tomorrow's conversation. "And you and Dad are actually getting along, like genuinely?" Because he mentioned you're both having coffee with Cassie later this week, and I thought I was hallucinating. "That's true too," I confirmed, still somewhat amazed by the transformation in my relationship with Eric. "We found a better way to be in each other's lives." "Mom," Sophia's voice grew serious. "I don't know what happened on that cruise, but you sound happier than I've heard you in years." Her observation warmed me, confirming what I already knew, that something fundamental had shifted within me during those days at sea. "I am happier," I told her. "I've remembered who I am beyond all the labels and expectations. And it turns out, I really like that person." "I've always liked that person," my daughter said softly. "It's good to have her back." After we hung, I made myself a simple dinner and took it out to my back patio. The evening was mild, the garden fragrant with early summer blooms. As I ate, I scrolled through the photos from the cruise, not the carefully staged ones we had posted to Instagram, but the candid moments captured throughout our journey. Laughter on the deck at sunset, James teaching Harrison's son to play chess, Eric and Thomas engaged in animated conversation at the Meridian, Harrison and me, heads bent close together over coral specimens collected during our snorkeling adventure. Each image told a story of connection, of joy reclaimed, of life continuing beyond disappointment. They were far more precious to me than any reaction they had provoked back home. My phone chimed with a new message, Harrison sending a photo of his kids safely delivered to their mother, along with a reminder of our dinner plans for Friday. I smiled, anticipating seeing him again and discovering how our connection might evolve beyond the magical bubble of the cruise. Another notification appeared, an update to our newly created group chat titled Second Chance Voyagers. James confirming Sunday brunch details, Thomas sharing information about the renovation project, Robert posting a humorous meme about cruise withdrawal, Eric mentioning a maritime law article that had reminded him of our trip, and a final message arrived. This one from Cassie. So excited for coffee on Thursday. I have big news about art school. I set the phone aside, content to be present in this moment of quiet fulfillment. The cruise that began as a petty revenge plot had transformed into the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with authentic connections, reclaimed friendships, and unexpected possibilities. The two old women, excluded from her friend's getaway, had found something far more valuable than inclusion in their wine-tasting weekend. She had found herself, vibrant, worthy, and ready for whatever adventures came next. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.